In this episode, we will demonstrate as to how you can implement a recycler view to show the playlist data coming from an API. This episode will talk about view holder, card view, adapter for data binding with recycler view, and more. So let's get started. To begin, let's add the dependency for recycler view. So recycler view is nothing but an advanced version of the list view which you have already used in previous Android versions. So once added, include it within your layout. Add an ID parameter so that you can have the reference of it available within the activity. So once included within the layout, have it included within your activity. By doing find view by ID, or in this case I'm going to use butter knife, which is a library which will allow you to remove all the additional code which is required to include a control. So all you need to do is call the annotation bind and refer the ID which is there in the layout. Once that is done, just call the butterknife.bind method and associate the current instance of the activity. So next step is to actually create or associate a layout manager for the recycler view, which is nothing more than defining the representation of how you need to show the data, like as a single row with one column, or you want to have multiple rows defined, etc. So we are defining it as vertical with one column. So every recycler view is coming with a method call named set layout manager, to which we need to pass the define layout manager. So to associate data to a recycler view, we need to have an adapter created. So even for representation, we are not yet defined as to how the data which is coming from the API needs to be represented as individual rows. So for that, let's create an item element in the layout. Let's call it playlist item. So these are the individual rows which will be created once data is available. So we are making sure that the content has to be wrapped around and it takes up the whole width of the parent object. and you add your own customizations like have a color for the background. For my case, I would prefer it to have it as transparent object because that is how I have defined or designed my views to be. So my individual row comprises of an image, which is the playlist image, which comes from the server on the extreme left side. And there is a title beside the image. So these are the two elements I'm interested in displaying as a playlist row object. So make sure that the orientation is horizontal. So let's add a reference to a new element called a card view, which is an enhanced layout element which can be used to include some more features when we are actually using the row element. So instead of having it within the inner elements within a linear layout, we can actually include something called as a card view. So define your card view and have it within have all the elements within the card view instead of the linear layout. So let's create the adapter required to display the data or for binding the data. We'll call it as playlist adapter. So inside an adapter, you can define something called as a view holder, which is nothing more than a collection of each controls coming under a view holder object, and then you access those elements through the instance of this view holder. So view holder just instantiates using by having an instance of the view which it needs to have a control on. So in this case it is our layout element. So within the view holder, we access all the instances of the controls which are required for display. Here in this case, we are getting a reference of the cart view element which we added within the playlist item. As well as the image view and the text title element. So with that, we have access to the controls which needs to be bound when data is available. So we are using, for that we are using the view holder. So in this case, we need to pass the view on which the binding has to happen. So for that we use a button knife dot bind method. So also make sure that the playlist adapter or the adapter which you are creating is extending the RecyclerView.adapter method, and that in turn also accepts a type of the view holder which you are creating. So RecyclerView.adapter class comes with some abstract methods which you need to override and then use it, like the item count, which is the count of the elements which is received, which needs to be actually displayed. So this will ideally define the number of rows which will be listed. And for the playlist, I have already created an element called playlist item, which is a model object, using which I'll be receiving the content from the API. So let's create a default constructor. And create one more constructor, not the default, and then pass the instance of the playlist items, which is an array which is coming from the server. We parse it and then send this to the adapter. And as I had mentioned, get item count should return the size of the array which is being passed for display. So the method on create view holder is where the display or the elements for display within the view holder is being created. So within the on create view holder, you need to inflate or create the instance of the row which you are using. In this case, so ideally I should call layout and then have it as, so this is the element, playlist item is the layout which we are inflating here, and return the view holder which we created. So if you can see that on create view holder method, we are instantiating the view item by inflating the element and then getting the reference of playlist view holder, or creating the reference of playlist view holder by passing that inflated layout and then returning the playlist element or the playlist view holder. So after that is done, on bind view holder method, set the values required. So on bind view holder method is returning the position. Using that you can get the value from the array by calling the get method and then set those values using the holder or the view holder. So this is the response coming from the retrofit API call. If you are not aware of it, please check out the previous tutorial where it is being explained. So on the response, where we are passing the body and getting it within a playlist data element. Once that is done, we create the playlist adapter. And then set adapter to the recycler view and pass the adapter which we created now. So the adapter is receiving the array of playlist which will be displayed. So if you are using butter knife, make sure that the activity instance is also received. Some other variations we are making here, because we use the card view, is that we will set a background to the card view and something called as elevation, which is coming as part of the new versions of Android SDK. Elevation is nothing but adding a shadow for an element. So you can add elevation directly to any element by using an elevation method. So you'll have to set a DP for that. So let's stylize by adding some font family and font stylings etc. to our title elements. So by default, I'm just using the launcher icon for the playlist image view. So we are all set to start seeing the application. So I'll just run and see what is the output that is being received now. So data is being received through the Retrofit API call, and then it is being passed through the adapter to the RecyclerView. So app is running now. Let's see. Okay, so you can see the data is coming, but it's a little jumbled. We'll try to make it a little better. So I have just made some modifications here and just running the code again. Let's see. Okay, it is, you can see that the data is coming from the server. I have not yet bound the image view to actually receive the playlist image, so let's do that as well. So I'm using something called as a circle image view, which is a third-party library available. So include that reference. Even without this library, you can create circular image views by using different backgrounds and setting the stroke, etc. So for ease of my work, I'm just using this library. And for binding the data, I'll be using a library called Picasso, which has many features like what needs to be shown when there is no image available when the response comes back, or what's need to be shown as a loader image, etc. All these are customized as part of Picasso. So I'll use that library here. So let's use Picasso to bind the image for the playlist. So Picasso is expecting a context to be passed, so let's pass it as part of the adapter constructor. And instantiate so that it is available within this adapter class instance. So once that's done, you just need to pass it as a context to the Picasso instance, and then load. So load is expecting a URL or URI path, which we already have through the snippet. So you have a thumbnail. So in your case, it will be the path of your the image which you need to load. In my case, it is coming through this API, which will return the URL. So usage of Picasso is pretty much straightforward. It accepts context, then it it receives the URL and it asks to which element it needs to load the image. So that's also done now. Let's run and see the output. There you go. So that's our final output. We have the image loaded now. Hope you liked this video. If so, please give your thumbs up by liking the video. Also, please check all other related videos in this playlist if you require more clarity on the initial implementations. Subscribe to our channel and watch out for more interesting episodes. Cheers.